In this video, we'll tell you about the 5 most profitable scams until they were caught. Understanding how disasters happen to investors in the past can help current investors avoid them in the future. Here are some of the all-time most significant cases of companies betraying their investors. Some of these cases are truly amazing. Try to look at them from a shareholder's perspective. Unfortunately, the shareholders involved had no way of knowing what was really happening as they were being tricked into investing. 5. James Paul Lewis Jr. Financial Advisory Consultant's Ponzi Scheme. Money scams often involve misrepresenting the facts, but James Paul Lewis Jr. took it a step further. Lewis operated the Orange County-based financial advisory consultants and promised investors yearly returns of 18% to 40% according to a 2005 release from the U.S. Department of Justice. Although he told investors that he would use the money to purchase and sell distressed businesses, make commercial loans, lease medical equipment, and finance insurance premiums, Lewis had other plans for the money. According to the DOJ release, Lewis used the approximately $300 million to enrich himself and others. He reportedly bought homes and luxury cars, invested in other companies with investors' money, and used FAC funds to trade currency futures. No one managed to spot the investment scam for 7 years. In the end, this Ponzi scheme raised more than $300 million, involved more than 3,000 investors, and caused victims to lose at least $50 million, according to the release. In 2005, Lewis pleaded guilty to mail fraud and money laundering. 4. The Enron Bankruptcy, 2001. Ken Lay was the hapless CEO of Enron, a company that employed approximately 22,000 people and claimed revenues of nearly $101 billion in the year 2000. In 2001, however, it came out that Enron's finances were a cooked-up fiction, involving all sorts of creative accounting. The scandal brought down Enron and its laughably incompetent auditors, the Arthur Andersen accounting firm, and resulted in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, whose main purpose is to make it financially difficult for small companies to issue stock. Score 1 for big business. Fun fact, Fortune magazine named Enron America's most innovative company for 6 consecutive years, thereby proving that Fortune magazine is written by idiots. Prior to this debacle, Enron, a Houston-based energy trading company, was, based on revenue, the 7th largest company in the United States. Though some complicated accounting practices that involved the use of shell companies, Enron was able to keep hundreds of millions worth of debt off its books. Doing so fooled investors and analysts into thinking this company was more fundamentally stable than it actually was. Additionally, the shell companies run by Enron executives recorded fictitious revenues, essentially recording $1 of revenue multiple times. This practice created the appearance of incredible earning figures. Eventually, the complex web of deceit unraveled, and the share price dove from over $90 to less than 30 cents. As Enron fell, it took down with it Arthur Andersen, the 5th leading accounting firm in the world at the time. Andersen, Enron's auditor, basically imploded after David Duncan, Enron's chief auditor, ordered the shredding of thousands of documents. The fiasco at Enron made the phrase "cook the books" a household term once again. 3. WorldCom, 2002. Not long after the collapse of Enron, the equities market was rocked by another billion-dollar accounting scandal. Telecommunications giant WorldCom came under intense scrutiny after yet another instance of some serious book cooking. WorldCom recorded operating expenses as investments. Apparently, the company felt that office pens, pencils, and paper were an investment in the future of the company, and therefore expensed or capitalized the cost of these items over a number of years. In total, $3.8 billion worth of normal operating expenses, which should all be recorded as expenses for the fiscal year in which they were incurred, were treated as investments and were recorded over a number of years. This little accounting trick grossly exaggerated profits for the year the expenses were incurred. In 2001, WorldCom reported profits of more than $1.3 billion. In fact, its business was becoming increasingly unprofitable. Who suffered the most in this deal? The employees. Tens of thousands of them lost their jobs. The company said an internal audit had discovered that $3.3 billion in profits were improperly recorded on its books from 1999 to the first quarter of 2002. This is on top of the $3.8 billion in expenses the company said it had improperly reported as capital investments. WorldCom now says it must issue revised financial statements for 2000 and 1999 as well. The revision will reduce 2000 profits by more than $3.2 billion. But this may not be the end of accounting horrors, as the company warned it may find more problems. Is there a new twist to the latest disclosures? WorldCom said most of the $3.3 billion irregularity involved the manipulation of reserves. Companies set aside reserves to cover estimated losses, such as uncollected payments from customers and judgments in lawsuits and other expected costs. Are reserves normal business practice? It is a perfectly legitimate practice, like setting aside funds for a rainy day. But reserves can be abused to create the accounting equivalent of a slush fund. If a company wanted to massage profits to meet Wall Street expectations, it can transfer the necessary sums from the reserve. The suspicion is that WorldCom deliberately inflated its reserves to be able to dip into them to boost profits in order to meet profit projections. Who is to blame? WorldCom's chief executive, John Sidgmore, blamed the company's former chief financial officer, Scott Sullivan, and the former controller, David Meyer. The two were fired for claiming $3.8 billion in regular expenses as capital investment in 2001. The pair were arrested in New York, handcuffed, and paraded in front of TV cameras as part of the Bush's administration crackdown on corporate crime. Charged with securities fraud, conspiracy, and other charges, they face 65 years in prison. WorldCom's founder and former chief executive Bernie Ebbers says he was unaware of the accounting problems and has not been charged. 2. The Madoff Pyramid, 2008. Bernie Madoff, the former chair of the NASDAQ and founder of the market-making firm Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, was turned in by his two sons and arrested on December 11, 2008, for running a widespread Ponzi scheme. The then 70-year-old kept his hedge fund losses hidden by paying early investors with money raised from others. This fund consistently recorded an 11% gain every year for 15 years. The fund's supposed strategy, which was provided as the reason for the consistent returns, was to use proprietary option collars that are meant to minimize volatility. This scheme duped investors out of approximately $50 billion. He was sentenced to 150 years behind bars. Madoff died in prison on April 14, 2021, at the age of 82. The only advantage of financial meltdowns is that they smoke out fraud. Compared to the havoc wreaked by Greenspan's course of deregulation, Madoff's Ponzi scheme was chicken feed, involving a measly $18 billion. However, the fact that Madoff was able to keep the scheme going for so long is ample testament to the fact that the US government, despite repeated scandals, frauds, ripoff, hoaxes, and general fancy mischief, isn't really serious about regulating the financial sector. The SEC even investigated his operations and failed to find anything wrong, even though the impossibility of his business model was staring them in the face. Fun fact, Madoff claims that the most of the bankers through which he worked knew that he was pulling a scam, but said nothing. 1. The Great Wall Street Ripoff. By far the biggest fraud of all time, the Great Wall Street Ripoff involved far more money in real dollars than all the financial frauds of the past put together. The fraud, perpetrated by several large financial firms, consisted of selling fraudulent mortgage-backed securities, thereby creating a financial bubble. When the bubble burst, the resulting crash destroyed trillions of dollars of real investment, threw most of the world into a crippling recession, and created massive unemployment. The fraud and all the disasters that followed stemmed from the almost complete deregulation of the financial industry, spearheaded by Alan Greenspan, pictured, and abetted by both political parties. Fun fact, unlike all the other previous frauds in this post, the Great Wall Street Ripoff is going entirely unpunished. Despite the fact that the CEOs of the financial institutions repeatedly lied to investors and profited mightily from the fraud, it appears as if nobody will serve a single day in jail. This is apparently because the ill-gotten gain is so spectacularly enormous that it has not only allowed the perpetrators to buy control of the government, but also to run a well-orchestrated and highly effective campaign to direct the anger of the public upon other victims of the fraud, rather than upon the perpetrators themselves. As such, the Great Wall Street ripoff represents the final and complete victory of the fraudsters over attempts to restrain them by law. What's fun about that fact? Unless you're one of the criminals who pulled it off, in which case, it's freaking hilarious! Do let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced any of these scams. Thanks for watching.